Brown?
Here.
Ms. Herbert?
Here.
Mr. Brennan?
Present.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for being here. Good crowd today. Look forward to some wonderful information from our public safety professionals. We'll move on to item number 1, public safety updates. Chief Skip Holbrook.
Good morning, Councilman Brennan, Councilman Brown, Herbert. It's my pleasure to present our first public safety briefing of the year. We're a little bit past our first quarter, but I'm going to be providing you some numbers and some discussion on year-to-date crime and some trends that we're seeing. I've also got 2 people that are going to speak to a couple of things. One is our investigative analyst, Cannon Fulmer. He's going to talk about our dashboards. And the other one is Sergeant Bob Hall. He's going to speak to some of the technology discussion related to technology that could potentially impact pursuits.
Is there other technology we're going to talk about? Is there a camera update?
And I have a
as well?
camera update.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
perfect. Thanks, sir.
All right. So we'll start with our year-to-date numbers. We're very pleased with how we're trending at this time. And as I always say, when we talk about numbers, it is a snapshot of where we are this year compared to last year. What you see before you right now is what we refer to as our weekly crime report. Every week, command staff meets and we work off of this particular sheet. This is a citywide breakdown, but we also break it down by regions, and our region commanders, they speak to the trends and their strategies to address upticks in certain crimes. But what you can see here is red is good. We're seeing, we've had 5 homicides this year, and that's tracking the same as last year, which was a decrease from the previous year. We recently had a shooting over the weekend on Saturday on Farrow Road. It was fatal. Our investigators, with the aid of technology, cameras, they were able to make a very quick apprehension. We made an arrest on that within 24 hours. And again, it speaks to just how important technology is, that we continue to leverage our technology, and it is a force multiplier for us, and it certainly, I think, contributed in this case as well. All across the board in all our class Part 1 crimes, we're down. In particular, robberies down 22%, aggravated assaults are down 30%. We really watch closely our aggravated assaults, and I'll speak a little bit more about that on our next slide, because included in that is our person-hit shootings. Our property crimes with burglary are down slightly, 5%. Auto breakings down 24%. Larcenies, oftentimes, that's impacted by our box stores. That's down 11%. And then motor vehicle theft is down, I can't read it, I think that's 36%. But all in all, violent crimes down 27%, property crime 16%, and overall crime 18%. So we're very pleased with how that is tracking. Next slide is what we really pay attention to. Our priority has been and remains violent crime, gun crime in particular. This is our person hit shooting report that Investigator Fulmer prepares every week for us. We look at year-to-date, and we also look at week-to-week changes and 4-week comparisons. As you can see, year-to-date, our person hit shootings are down 41%. Our non-fatal shootings are down 43%, and our gun murders are flat. We're very pleased with that. We feel like our strategy is solid. We still are very much offender specific. We know our prolific offenders. Our crime gun intelligence unit, along with our VCAP, do a great job being very offender focused. We just had a very successful ceasefire call-in with our violent offenders in March, and that still is kind of our marquee program that we think is very successful. So Is there any questions about person-hit shootings?
Ms. Herbert?
Just real quick, how often do you do the ceasefire? I've been trying to get to one.
Twice a year.
Twice a year.
Yes, ma'am. Our next dashboard, and I'm going to have Cannon come up as we move through these dashboards, but this is our ShotSpotter dashboard, and we're often asked about ShotSpotter technology, and again, we look at it from about every angle possible. I guess what I would simply point out with this is we have talked about, we have 7 square miles. The Sheriff's Department has recently added 8 square miles, and University of South Carolina 2 square miles downtown that catches the vista in some of their venues downtown. We have excellent coverage. We all share the data. We have a co-response model for anything that's contiguous in terms of the response areas. It has put us on shooting scenes every single time there's a shooting. And one of the benefits of this that is often not talked about, and it's hard to measure, is the trust side of things. We know when we first onboarded ShotSpotter, we did not get a corresponding 911 call when we would get an alert for a variety of reasons. I think what you can underline was lack of trust or confidence in law enforcement. And what we see now is almost every time there's a corresponding call, and that's because what our community has seen is we show up, we collect important information, and we ask questions, and this is important to us. So what this tells us right now is this time last year, our ShotSpotter alerts were about 100 more. So we're down in alerts, and the frequency we're right at 22. This time last year, it was about 26 in terms of frequency, weekly frequency. So I think we're progressing well there as well. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about our dashboards. I don't think we've really talked about them as much as we should. You know, we really pride ourselves on being very open and transparent with how we do business. And Investigator Fulmer's done a great job of creating some publicly viewed dashboards where folks can go in. You can manipulate these and really be an informed citizen. Our dashboard right now links our gun seizures, auto breakings, and ShotSpotter and shootings. So I'm going to let Cannon step to the microphone for a minute and manipulate this and just give you a brief demonstration on how this works.
Thanks, Chief. Hi, I'm Cannon Fulmer. I'm a crime analyst at the police department. If you wouldn't mind, could we start with the shooting dashboard? And so I'm going to show you 4 dashboards we've created for sharing crime data with the public. And I'm going to start with the person hit shooting dashboard. This has been live for about a year. And this is hosted on our website. It'll say person hit shootings at the top. Or the one at the bottom that says shootings there we go. And so this is just a look at the data we have in the police department on where gun violence is occurring in the city, just some basic information on the geography of that. We also show the demographics and the trends over time. Well, I'll start with this one. This is a ShotSpotter data. So this is a public-facing dashboard that shows ShotSpotter data. The main points I want people to get from this are to see that the overwhelming majority of our ShotSpotter alerts are detections that just detect a single round of gunfire. Some of them detect multiple rounds. The majority of these cases are instances where nothing struck by gunfire. A very small minority of them are cases where a person is hit. But all of this is interactive, so members of the public can go in and look at it, change the parameters, and see how this data interacts. All these data points interact with each other. Could you go to the links all over here? Okay, great. Well, so we also have the person hit shooting data. And you know what that shows is like demographics, where it's occurring in the city, the times of day. Right now, we're in the midst of like an 18 to 24 month downward trend in gun violence. Other cities in the country are experiencing the same thing. I'm happy with these dashboards. I've seen local media use them to correctly frame stories about gun violence in Columbia. I've also created a dashboard that shows information on gun seizures and gun thefts in Columbia, so this is two different populations. So we've had an increase in gun seizures over the past decade, and here you can see that. And we've had a decrease in the guns stolen from our jurisdiction over that time. If it's possible to look
What's that statistic? The gun stolen, where can we
So on this,
understand, I mean, that our efforts are working?
where is it displayed?
Yeah, where can I see that?
Yes, sir. If you can see the screen that I can see up here on the
All right.
display. So these orange bars are the number of guns stolen from within our jurisdiction per year. And the blue bars are the number of guns our agency seizes per year.
So with the 2024 numbers, do you think they're going to trend to the years past?
Yes, sir. I think we're in the middle of a downward trend on that. And right now, I would expect 2024 to end up having fewer guns seized in stolen in 2023.
And so, the guns stolen, these are reported stolen,
Yes, ma'am.
or does it include you find a gun and then learn that it was stolen?
No, ma'am. So these are two different data sets. So the guns that we seize, about 20% of those were reported stolen in NCIC. Those guns tend to originate from the region, like especially Richland County, Lexington County. We don't get very many of them from very far afield. Another interesting thing about this data set is the guns that are reported stolen to us, we only see about 14% of those guns again.
So you're saying 80% of guns that are stolen are not reported to?
80% of guns that we seize are not reported in NCIC as stolen when we seize them. And so those could be unlawful possession cases, guns used in crimes, whatever. Of the guns that are stolen from our agency, we only recover about 10% of those. When guns are stolen from our agency, 2/3 of the time that we have a gun reported stolen, a serial number is not reported along with that gun. So in that, I'm sorry, in 1/3 of the cases, no serial number is reported. So those are guns we would never know if they get recovered. If we seized it, we wouldn't know. If another agency seizes it, we wouldn't know. So we do know in the population of guns that we're seizing, probably roughly 1/3 of the guns that are actually stolen in that population, we don't know that because whoever they were stolen from didn't report the serial number.
Gotcha, thank you.
Are most guns stolen from cars?
I think most are stolen from cars. Almost all of them are stolen from cars and burglaries. A lot of these auto breakings are happening to unsecured vehicles where the guns are not secured. And that's displayed on one of these pages, and this will be live soon and anybody can explore it. But when it comes to gun thefts, Sergeant Moody in the Property Crimes Unit did a good job of recording whether or not the gun was secured at the time it was stolen. I think it's roughly 1/3 of the guns off the top of my head were not secured at the time that they were stolen. But I want to look to double check, but it's all going to be out there in the public.
Question about the serial numbers. I'm asking for a friend. Where all on a gun or in someone's packaging would they find the serial number? Is it mostly just on the gun itself?
Yes, ma'am. If people have the paperwork from the purchase, they'll have it there too.
Okay.
But the serial number also appears on the gun.
And I'm just wondering, so if it's stolen and you only have the gun, then I guess it's not intentional not giving you serial numbers, they just don't have it.
Yes, ma'am. I would assume most of the time it's not reported, it's not intentional.
Okay.
So we also have a dashboard on auto breakings. And that just shows information on where auto break-ins are most likely to occur, what kind of premises. So they're usually happening in parking lots or at residents or hotels. It shows the time of day. They're usually, here we go. So as you can see, they usually happen late at night between maybe like 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. Trucks are frequently broken into. In about 30% of the cases, there's no forced entry into the vehicle. Over on the right-hand side, you can also see the kind of items stolen. So often we have like cash, purses, credit cards, firearms is another top item stolen from auto break-ins. Like with everything else we've been talking about, auto break-ins have been trending downward over the past few years.
But in the past, auto break-ins trend upwards during the summer months. Is that fair to say?
Well, so I don't work with this data all the time, but what I found when I built this dashboard is we can see here like July is the month over the past like 3.5 years that we've had the most auto break-ins. I think they probably have slightly different patterns. I think when people are out sort of in the entertainment districts and stuff, that's a high time for auto break-ins because there's just a lot of vehicles around. And they tend to happen in target-rich environments. So hotels where there's lots of cars parked, apartment complexes where there's parking lots, and especially places where people can be walking through the parking lot and not seem out of place, are places and situations where auto break-ins happen a lot.
And Chief, we're mindful of reacting to that with operations, patrols and everything, correct?
Yes, sir, we are. We have crime suppression details that run essentially in every region, and a lot of times that's based on historic trends. We know at certain times that there's where we would see an uptick. We try to be proactive in front of that. We also use we have bait cars that we use and materials that we can track that we put out. We put details on that. So we've also had some success, as we've talked about here recently, where we collaborate with SLED's aviation unit. They're helping us with crime suppression details at certain days of the week now, and it's been proven to be very successful.
We have a lot of private business partners that have their own camera lighting systems, Walmart, Lowe's. Are we able to tap into that to track break-ins in these large parking areas?
Yes and no. We are working for, I'm going to speak to a little bit when we talk about
Okay.
cameras, about where we hope to go with that in the future in terms
Okay.
of some agreements with the private business community.
Well, before we move on, can you just, Ms. Herbert, Ms. Brown, if y'all have any questions, I just want to know, where did we pull this national data to compare where we're at currently? And can you comment on how we stand amongst our peers in the state and in the Southeast and in the country?
Yeah, I'm going to let Cannon speak to the data that we look at and how we look at
Okay.
it. So I think I know where you're going with this. So there's all kinds of data that's out there. We report based on national standards through, it's called NIBRS, and Cannon can speak to that. But what you see oftentimes with some of these search engines that take you to communities and look at data, they oftentimes are looking at data from a metro area versus a specific jurisdiction, city, proper city limits. I think that's what you see a lot when it comes to the Midlands. And it really skews some of the numbers. The one thing before Cannon speaks to that, Mr. Chairman, is a comment I would make about auto break-ins, and it kind of goes to the point you're making, I think. People, when they look to see if they're going to relocate a business or move their family, they're going to look at schools, taxes, and crime. And as I'm speaking at community meetings, what I say in particular with, if you look at our property crime rate, comparatively speaking, it's high per capita. We're seeing great, excellent trends right now, but it's high. If people would lock their cars, we could affect our property crime rate 40, 50%. I mean, literally overnight, if people would just lock their cars. Because what we see with car break-ins is occasionally you see glass breakage, but typically it's just checking door handles and looking at it, because it just takes too much time to do anything else. But you check a door handle, car's open, you find merchandise, oftentimes a firearm in there, and if you find a key fob, you've hit the lottery. Then they take the car and they got the merchandise, and that's not unusual either. So, can you explain?
Chief, can I ask you a quick question? So I totally agree with you on the locking the cars, and just for full disclosure, when I take the dogs out every night at, let's say 9:30, I walk up to every car in our driveway and I go click, 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 and traditionally 1 out of every 3 is unlocked. Okay, so I lock it and we go back in. Would it be helpful, and I get a lot of the media as well as billboard media say, hey, we would love to do public service announcements for the city. We'll do them for free. So would it be sensible for you to do a public service announcement, and we try to run it on Lamar and Grace billboards and WIS and LTX and.
Well, I think especially leading into July, which is peak
Yeah,
month.
right, that's great, that's a great idea, and we just kind of, I've been somewhat, not critical, but messaging is important in the world, and I think we have to get this messaging out to people, and try to, it's like seatbelts, you know, it's just, you know, over time, just getting this message out that statistic is powerful, 50%. And you're allowing guns, you know, your gun is now gonna hit the street.
We completely affect this, you know, this number, and it is what, you know, I refer to as shared ownership. I mean, our citizens have to be our partners in this.
Well, I'm gonna push us to try to engage all types of media to really make a push. I like the concept, it's July, and July's, you know, the most break-ins, and we can make the most impact, and let's do it as, like you said, as a community. How can we make the most
Yeah,
impact?
I think that's a great idea. I'd like to see that move
All right,
forward.
We're glad to do that. So Ken, this would be the 101 version. He speaks above my head a lot, so if you can just talk about how we validate our numbers.
Yes, sir. When it comes to gun violence, I track 11 other agencies that publish their data online monthly through open data portals, and I calculate the shooting rate per population for those other agencies so we can get a very quick, up-to-date look at like national level gun trends. And that's why I said that we're trending downward, and so are most of the other agencies that I can see are trending downward over the past like 18 to 24 months. Where we sit is in per capita gun violence is higher than we want to be, but significantly lower than a lot of jurisdictions that have a big problem with that. So,
Great, that answers it.
Is that just do you think that's a sustainable trend, or is that like a post-COVID trend?
so the overall picture is this. Across the country in 2020, there's a massive lurch upward in gun violence in the community. And that was sustained for about like 12 to 24 months across the country. And then things started trending downward 2021, 2022. And most agencies saw that. There are some outliers, but that's what's going on. In Colombia, we made it an extra probably 12 months before we had an increase in community violence. It went up and it's been trending downward. So right now, it seems really robust because it's happening across the country, and I'm optimistic that things are gonna go down. I think we're about at 2019 levels now. If you look at like 12-month rolling averages for gun violence in the city, I think we have lots of room to improve below 2019 levels, but I'm optimistic it's gonna keep going. But, you know, we have a lot of work to do to make sure that continues. so.
Understood.
Yeah, a lot of agencies do this, but I track it by victim rather than shooting incident. So person shot. So sometimes we'll have an incident where 2 people are shot, 3 people are shot, something like that. I think that's the right way to count it. Most of these agencies report by victim, but for those that don't, I then go back and calculate by incident too to facilitate comparison between us by population size.
Perfect, thank you. Ms. Herbert, do you have any questions before we move on?
Are we going back to ShotSpotter? Based on this outline, or are we done with ShotSpotter?
We're
We're
kind
done
of,
unless you have questions.
I do have a question. So I've heard it in the news a lot. I want to confirm whether or not we show the locations of the cameras in our public facing. I don't know if y'all have heard that in the news, but that's been said in the news that we do that.
No, we don't. As a matter of fact, I couldn't even tell you where the sensors are. They're not cameras, they're noise detection, acoustic equipment. The ShotSpotter, the SoundThinking, the vendor that we, that we have an agreement with, they do the engineering. We tell them through our data where we think our coverage area needs to be solely based on data. And then their engineers, they go into that coverage area, and they actually handle all the agreements, whether it's with a private citizen, a business owner, Dominion, to actually place the sensors. So we don't even have any, engineering input on that.
I think it's a very helpful technology. Are we continuing to pursue the growth of that system? Is there federal, state grants out there?
We feel like we are very much on target, for lack of a better word, on our coverage
Okay.
area. So we'll occasionally have some, we have an area right now that we're keeping very close attention to off of Plowden Road. It's an apartment complex. We've actually served them with a nuisance letter. And, you know, a lot of times there's factors, environmental factors that are contributing. So it's, you know, that we've never said this technology is not expensive. We know that. We try to be a good steward of taxpayers' money. We know that you all have always been supportive of things we bring to you. And we feel like that our coverage area that we have this is sufficient right now for the problem that we're.
Well, I think it's fantastic, and kudos to you with working with USCPD and the Sheriff's Department. That coordination and communication, I think, is very efficient and effective.
Ms. Herbert, do you have anything else related to ShotSpotter?
No, sir, that's it.
Thanks, Canna. All right, this next portion of this briefing, I want to talk a little bit about technology. This is just a shot of the Real-Time Crime Center, our video board. Again, what that board represents is ShotSpotter, what we just talked about, all of our different camera systems. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Our situational awareness board, which is all of our assets, our people, our vehicles, our partnering agencies, our fire and medic. We can look at that board and see where everybody is at any given time and move people as necessary. So an update on our citywide camera system. We actually have 199 out of our 200 sites deployed and working right now. Our last site should be up any day now. Each of those sites, if you remember in that box that you see, has 4 cameras. So we have, if you do the math, that's 800 cameras. We have 25 pan tilt zooms, ones that we can manipulate. There's another 360 plus Genetec cameras for our facilities. So all in all, we have over 1,200 cameras throughout our city and through the city facilities that we can monitor through the Real-Time Crime Center. We also have 15 LPRs. That's what you see on the left side of the screen. Those are license plate readers that are, again, strategically placed in major thoroughfares. The cameras and LPRs, all this is in the public areas. Nothing's on private property. Often, when you talk about surveillance cameras and stuff, people are talking about invasions of privacy. This is all in public areas. We're not looking in people's windows and things like that. This is main thoroughfares, points of entry and exit from neighborhoods. So before we talk a little bit about pursuit technology, you'd mentioned what we're doing with our business community. Right now, we're working with Motorola, which is our camera vendor, has put together kind of a package that we're introducing to our business community that if they're looking at potentially increasing camera coverage, that there's some products that they can consider that we can have access to. We also have some technology that we are still in the process of implementation that allows us to have connectivity with other systems. And we'll be working with our legal department to create some agreements with some of our private sector partners that are interested in allowing us, limited access when we have an incident or we're reviewing. Right now, what happens, we have all of our cameras mapped along with other cameras that we know. So if we have an incident, we can immediately look and see if there's cameras in that area. We can dispatch detectives or officers to do a canvass to see if there's other private cameras, and then we, of course, go direct with the folks that would have access and ownership of that to see if they will grant us access to that. And most of the time, we always have cooperation, so we feel like this is a good public-private partnership to pursue.
I know you're working with a couple of hospitality districts to really tap into their their desire for
Yes, sir.
for better
Five
coverage.
Points is indicated a lot of interest in this, and we hope to maybe pilot this process with them and let that be an example for others to follow.
Great.
So I want to spend a minute talking about pursuits, in particular, some technology. There's been, quite a bit of discussion. I think in the last month in particular, we, post very tragic situation that happened in Columbia involving one of our police officers. But I want to make a couple of things clear. At the last council meeting, there was two examples cited and was kind of couched with pursuit. One was the tragic death of one of our officers in 2015 as a traffic-related fatality, and then most recently a fatal collision with a police officer that involved a citizen. In 2015, the officer was responding to a shots fired call, and this is an important distinction. That officer was responding what we refer to as Code 3, and that is with their lights on, their emergency lights on, and their sirens activated. That's called an emergency response. That is a response that we have for in-progress calls. The officer that was involved in the collision, the fatal collision with a citizen last month, was responding to assist other officers that had engaged in a pursuit of a murder suspect. The officer that was involved in the collision was not in the pursuit, wasn't even near the pursuit. Simply, he was responding to assist. Oftentimes when we have pursuits, we only authorize 2 officers to participate in a pursuit. So oftentimes when our pursuits are short, somebody will jump and run. We call it bush bonding. They literally jump from the car and then run, and it'll result in a foot chase. So there's a lot of communication over the radio when a pursuit's initiated. And so officers do respond to the area. They're not in the pursuit. They're just responding to the area that the pursuit is occurring in the event that the suspect flees on foot. On that particular day, a pursuit that officer was responding to continued throughout the city, went to the other, to the south side of the city, and the suspect ultimately jumped from his vehicle, ran into a wooded area, and was apprehended after a brief foot chase. But pursuit driving in general is one of the most serious and dangerous duties and responsibilities of a police officer. The primary responsibility of an officer in a pursuit of the violator is safety, and I underscore safety, the safety of the public, the safety of the violator, and the police officer. Our policy authorizes officers to engage in a vehicle pursuit only when they have cause to believe that the necessity to apprehend outweighs the immediate danger created by the pursuit to the officer and the public. The need for an immediate apprehension of the violator must continuously be weighed throughout the pursuit, and that's what we call our pursuit assessment. So just because you can pursue doesn't mean you need to pursue. So we have a number of categories that is prohibited to pursue. Misdemeanors, traffic offenses, we don't pursue. It's for serious crimes, serious violent crimes or serious crimes. So even when we're authorized to pursue, we weigh factors continuously. The officer that's engaging in pursuit, they're responsible for that analysis and looking at those factors, as is the supervisor and the watch commander. So everybody's dialed into these pursuits. They're looking, they want to know if the suspect can be identified and maybe apprehended later, the type of roadway that they might be on, where it's located, weather conditions, the seriousness of the offense, the risk created by the pursuit, traffic conditions, density, presence of other passengers, presence of pedestrians, and the degree of control that the suspect is showing in terms of their driving. They may be, an example would be they turn down a one-way street, or they turn into a neighborhood where kids are playing. Those are factors that you consider and you have to shut it down. And if you look at just numbers at a glance, you can see our pursuits are extremely low. And we even trended lower last year, and I would think we are tracking similar this year. But one thing that I really want to bring to your attention is, of the total pursuits, in 2022, 31 of those pursuits were terminated, and in 2023, 16. And what I mean by that is the officer says this is too dangerous, or they shut it down, or a supervisor intervenes and shuts it down. So we are continuously doing the weighing the risk, the inherent risk of the pursuit itself, and oftentimes making that call to shut that pursuit down. So I tell you all that just to put things in perspective. The couple of examples, again, they were not pursuits, they were emergency response, and I would argue that that is absolutely the most high-risk thing that we do. When we get an in-progress call, our officers are running code. They have a duty to exercise caution, and ever since 2015, we require officers to come to a stop and clear that intersection in a Code 3 response. A pursuit response allows you have to yield into the intersection and use due caution. So there's a distinction there. But we added that extra, restriction in Code 3 response back in 2015 following the tragic death of Stacey Case. Our policy is a model policy. I would consider it to be restrictive. We do after-action reviews. We follow CALEA standards, and we're required to do an analysis each year of our pursuits, and we do so.
Chief, a couple questions. So
Yes, sir.
are there any absolutes when it comes to a vehicle pursuit? Like if you get to 100 miles an hour, you got to shut it. Are there any absolutes or is it all just variable, intake of the different variables and deciding?
There's some absolutes policy-wise in terms of, the nature of the offense. But those risk factors, I would say, are not an absolute. They are factors to consider. Just using your example of 100 miles an hour, that inherently would be probably an extreme risk that we would not be involved in. But on Interstate 20 at 4 in the morning, perfect weather, clear skies, no traffic, it's possible that you would authorize a pursuit in that situation, and also checking to see if we have any aircraft in the air. We've had several pursuits with our crime suppression details when SLED's been up. They have connectivity to ShotSpotter. They have radio comms with us, and they've been able to take over the pursuit, and officers have been able to back off. And that's going to kind of lead us into this technology discussion.
I was going to ask, of the terminated pursuits, do we have data that says how many of those people were eventually apprehended?
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
Well, we do. Now, when we terminate a pursuit, there's not an apprehension. What we have data on is when somebody, crashes or runs off the road, jumps out of the car. A lot of times they'll slow down to, low speed and jump out of a car when it's actually moving, and the car will, continue rolling, may strike another vehicle or a pole or something. We also use tire deflation devices. They're often referred to as stop sticks. As you can see in the data in 2022, we deployed those 9 times successfully and 6 times in 2023. It's a device that actually looks similar to these guards here that you throw out in front of a tire. It's dangerous. The deployment is dangerous. We actually train for it, and you have to have had that training to actually have the equipment to do it. We will also assist other agencies that come into our jurisdiction. It's not unusual for the county to be engaged in a pursuit that will come into the city, and we've had successful deployments with stop sticks in those situations too.
Are those assists in this data for the pursuits?
Yes.
Okay, so if the sheriff's department has a pursuit through the municipal lines and our CPD is not a part of that, it's still in our CPD
No,
numbers?
it would not be reflected in it.
Okay.
If we're engaged in a pursuit, it's reflected. If a pursuit occurs in our jurisdiction and we're not involved, it's not in our
Okay.
data.
Understood, thank you.
So, again, we completely recognize and agree that there is probably not a more high liability thing that we do than emergency response, and pursuit is part of that, but emergency response is just it's critical. It's a critical part of our job, but it's also a very high-risk part of our job.
Chief, so I'm looking at the terminology as well, and we have vehicle pursuits here. Is there a natural assumption that a vehicle pursuit is over the speed limit? I mean, is that what folks assume, or is that how we treat it? Because I'm saying, can't we have a vehicle pursuit that's not a high speed?
Oh, absolutely. We have a lot of low-speed pursuits.
Okay.
Folks just, they're just not pulling over. You know,
Yeah.
they're trying, a lot of times a low-speed pursuit is they're trying to get to an area they're familiar with so they can flee from the car on foot. They may be trying to get, you know, back into a neighborhood that they live, or where they have somebody that might be receptive to, you know, helping conceal them or something, but it's not unusual to see a low-speed pursuit. So as we have discussed pursuits, or we've, you know, been in the news lately, you know, regarding pursuits, and in the last council meeting, the discussion was touched on technology, and is there some technologies that are out there that may help mitigate some of the risk and liability? And I'm going to ask Sergeant U-Haul to come up here and talk about two technologies that we were asked to look into, and he can speak a little bit about that. You have a briefing note, a hard copy of a briefing note that speaks in a little bit more detail. One technology, though, is GPS tracking technology, and another one is kind of making physical contact with the vehicle. And I'll let him talk a little bit about both of them.
Good morning, Sergeant U-Haul. I'm with the Traffic Safety Unit. I'm also a pursuit instructor, which gives me some purview into the operation of these, and the reconstruction I do in traffic crashes through the Traffic Safety Unit also gives me a little bit of expertise in the negative effects of some of these. So the first one I want to talk about is StarChase. It's a GPS solution for public safety. It uses a 54 millimeter bullet, for lack of a better term, that's fired from a push bumper mounted device that would be mounted on our existing push bumpers, roughly the size of a police speaker. That's activated when an officer gets within 20 to 25 feet. They can activate that device. They align the device with the vehicle left and right through the steering wheel. However, the vertical alignment, so if they want to get it on the vehicle and they're a little farther back and they need to aim a little higher, that's done through a device internal that's installed on the car. So they would look down, adjust up and down for vertical alignment, and deploy the device. Once the device is deployed, it sticks to the back of the vehicle. At that time, the officer can back away from the vehicle pursuit and then observe that pursued vehicle, the suspect vehicle, through an online portal. That online portal is accessible through their software licenses, and then it would give the ability for somebody to watch it from a distance and start moving officers towards where the car is going. So it'd still be pursued, just not in an active code 3 lights and sirens. We could probably manipulate around region to region as it traversed around. So that device, it has a vehicle mounted option, again, on the push bumper. There's also a handheld option that uses a AR-15 lower receiver with a modified upper receiver. Again, it has a 20 to 25-foot deployment distance. That deployment distance is obviously problematic for some areas in the city, especially in the urban environment we operate in. We're constantly, as we're doing a pursuit, we have to do the risk assessment the chief referred to. Okay? The officers have to assess speeds, environment, traffic conditions, pedestrian conditions, and it's a lot in an urban environment. So as we're doing that, we would have that one more problematic of trying to get target alignment by looking down and operating a device within the vehicle. But we also need to close that distance to 20 to 25 feet, which is roughly the distance right here from table to table. Most of the pursuits we see are of higher speeds, though we do have those low-speed pursuits. A typical pursuit can quickly gain to 60 miles an hour. And as we're closing that distance at 20 to 25 feet to deploy this device, we're, again, traveling 55, 60 miles an hour. We're covering a football field in like 3 seconds. So there's a risk assessment that's added to that, again, that we may have a propensity for a crash. Before I move on to the grappler, are there any questions about the Star Chaser technology, Star Chase technology?
Yeah, so I would like, I'm wondering, I'm looking through a couple of these. Have we had the opportunity to look at effectiveness or benchmark other cities who've used them and what their results have been?
So their stated effectiveness, as the company relays it, is roughly 85%.
85%.
85% is what they leave it at, pursuit apprehensions.
Okay, that's,
But that's covering the full gambit of what it's been used for through other agencies, to include things like DUI and traffic offenses and things we typically wouldn't pursue for to begin with. So if a vehicle did flee, you'd have to catch up and become actively involved in a pursuit for a little bit to deploy that, hopefully even momentarily. We have reached out. I've reached out to Highway Patrol. I'm still waiting a response. I do know from my own observations that they had 4 devices from Star Chase, and I'm waiting on the data from that.
okay.
Ms. Brown?
Is there a peer department that actively uses this technology that we're aware of?
Again, I just knew that Highway Patrol had 4 of them installed, and I'm just waiting for
But we don't
data
know of
from-
any specific city that uses this technology?
There's a list of cities that Star Chase has provided, and I just
If we
haven't
could
had the
get some of that
opportunity to reach
information.
out.
Yeah, okay, all right. So it's more metropolitan or would it be more rural? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Gotcha, thank you.
And so I do have one, and I don't know if you're prepared to answer this question. What would be the ideal situation that you believe Star Chase would be the most effective? Like if we were to get it, where would you see it being of assistance?
There's several areas. As it relates to a vehicle-mounted one, I see it being more useful, or I feel the police department would see it being more useful in our more rural outlying areas, such as some of the annexations we have further out in the northeast Columbia and southeast Columbia, out more rural areas like Leesburg Road, Percival Road, outlying areas, where there's a little less traffic and less pedestrians and other risk assessment concerns we need to be concerned with in a pursuit. So there's That's for the vehicle-mounted one. The handheld one, there's special weapons and tactics uses maybe, along with organized crime and narcotics.
So just to add to that, so hypothetically speaking, in a situation where somebody may drive off from a traffic stop where we have no other information, and so our policy would prohibit a pursuit of that vehicle. We have absolutely no information about that vehicle. That would be a scenario where you could potentially deploy this and, follow that car.
But you would have to move pretty quickly, because you got to do it within 20 feet.
You have to move quickly. You would have to have the availability of these devices on, lots of cars, I think, to understand that. Sergeant U-Haul is working with the vendor right now for us to potentially just do a pilot and look at the technology to see, if it's something that may benefit us. I do agree, we should always be looking at things innovatively, and, if there's an application for it, we've just been trying to think through our head. I'm sorry.
To the mic.
We've just been trying to work through that scenarios that potentially could apply here, but I want to continue to take you all back to our numbers and our policy, and we feel like, again, they are certainly, we have been involved in tragic situations, and just the inherent risk of what we do puts us in high liability situations like that. But it's important for us to have a model policy on anything that we do and follow policy, and we have lots of checks and balances, and I cannot emphasize enough, and I think you all would agree, our officers and supervisors make incredible, solid, split-second decisions every single day. And I think it's reflected in our data, whether we're looking at use of force, deadly force, or pursuits. Our numbers, considering the environment we police in and what our dangers are, our crime numbers tell us, it's incredible what these officers do every day and the decisions that we make. It's not perfect, and we always got to look at things to mitigate risk to not only ourselves but the public, and I think that's what we're trying to accomplish here. So, I think it's worth that look and discussion like we're
Absolutely.
doing.
Understood and very much respected. So please keep us up to date on the demonstration as it comes
I
forward.
wanted to tell you about one other technology that we were asked to look at, and I think, I do not think that this is something that would be something that we would want to consider. I'll say that up front, but he can briefly tell you a little bit about it.
The second technology that the police department was asked to research is called the Grappler. It's a police bumper. It would replace existing push bars on vehicles. Currently, they're modeled for certain vehicles, Chevy Silverado 1500s, Chevy Tahoes, and it would replace our existing bumper. It's a bumper that has a contained net and tether. How it works is, again, you have an internal device that's also mounted into the car. You would get within distance, which is right up on the rear of a car, deploy this device by aligning your vehicle offset to the tire you're trying to lasso, for lack of a better term. You deploy the device by activating it from the inside of the vehicle. It would latch on to the rear tire of the vehicle, a single rear tire, and then you would slow your vehicle and attempt to come to a stop, to basically cowboy lasso the vehicle to a stop. That has some issues with it, such as rear end collisions. A lot of our vehicle pursuits in the city are in the urban environment, turn left, turn right, turn left. And because of those turns, when we're snatching on a vehicle, if we were to snatch on one rear wheel of the vehicle and lock it up, the propensity for rollover incidents gets greatly increased. Grappler themselves admit that over 65 miles an hour, it has increased risk of rollover.
Perfect. Sergeant Uhal, thank you for that information. Ms. Herbert, do you have a question?
I do, and I may have misunderstood. For some reason, I thought we were looking at, and I have to look back at it, but looking at options or alternatives to pursuits. But these, both of these actually assist with pursuits.
Yes.
I mean, you would
so-
have to be in a pursuit to even be close enough to do any of the things that you're talking about.
Correct. Both technologies, you're in a pursuit. The grappler more so, as you're trying to physically stop that vehicle through the use of your vehicle and the tether. Star chase, again, you need to be in it for a minute to deploy the device to where you could then back away. It does have a key fob option, but most of our pursuits are not drive-offs from the roadside, so we'd already be on a traffic stop and typically have their information, they drive off. We know the identity of that person, or we have them on our body cam to where we can go back and identify that person. We're not gonna pursue them. Very, very few of our pursuits would be drive-off related.
That was gonna be my follow-up to Councilwoman Herbert, was that it seems like it almost may increase the inherent risk for the officer in these particular cases, because it adds a different level of complexity to the actual pursuit, trying to get within 20 feet or deploy certain things. Is that accurate?
That would be accurate. It is an added skill set for the officer that requires significant training. And in our urban environment, it may be difficult to deploy these technologies successfully.
Chief, I just want to make it clear and to the public that Sergeant Uhal, your team, they do practice the best policies that are out there for pursuits. That we are always training, and we're always learning more about best practices. Is that a fair statement?
That's a very fair statement. We are constantly reviewing model policy. Our being an accredited agency, our annual reviews require us to always review model policy and most importantly, be able to provide proofs that we're following policy. Policy overcomes a lot. And we're very aware of that. You just have to think back to when I first came here in 2014, it was not unusual to see, not only here in Columbia, but throughout our state, there's a number of officer-involved shooting into moving vehicles. We looked at model policy, and we changed our policy that restricted that prohibited shooting into vehicles. The state worked with us on a training video and pushed out model policy throughout our state. And since changing policy throughout the state with most departments now and a training component with that, we've almost eliminated officer-involved shootings in the moving vehicles. And it's just remarkable how policy drove those numbers down overnight.
Fantastic.
So model policy is critically important.
Okay.
One more quick question. If there is a pursuit, do you have like a closeout procedure that reviews the actual pursuit and kind of goes through it from the risk model and the different variables?
We do. We have any use of force pursuit, we have a review process, multiple layers all the way up to the deputy chief in my office. And then we also have after-action groups that meet. We have, if there's a traffic accident that's involved, we have an accident review board. If there's physical force involved, we have a force review board. So we have multiple layers of review, but we also have multiple layers of analysis. So we're always looking to see if we could have done things differently or do things better. Is it a training issue? Is it a policy issue? That analysis is ongoing every single day.
Thank you.
Ms. Herbert, anything else before we move on?
No, I guess the follow-up would be, at some point, seeing how the pilot goes with the STAR.
yes, we'll keep you updated on that.
Great.
And the very last thing, Councilman Brennan, you had mentioned you've had a couple of inquiries about fees and kind of our process with taxis. Sergeant U-Haul, again, who is over the traffic unit, that's one of their responsibilities is inspection and permitting of our taxis, and he can tell you the nuances between a taxi cab versus a private vehicle for hire like an Uber.
And before you start, Sergeant Ewell, how many taxis are currently operating in the city of Columbia?
We just did our annual vehicle for hire inspection last month, and we inspected 123 vehicle for hires. All of them were taxis.
Perfect, thank you, sir.
So, as part of that process, I guess, so to obtain a vehicle for hire permit, a company would have to first obtain a certificate of conveyance of necessity from city council. So if a person wanted to start a taxi company, they would typically start with business license and try and get a license, tell them, I wish to start a taxi company. Okay, they would be referred to Director of Public Works, who would then contact me and let me know that, hey, this company wants to start, can you check their vehicle color scheme, because we have a city ordinance protecting unique color schemes with other companies. So I would meet with the person initially. We'd go over their vehicle color scheme. I'd give them a printout of all the city ordinances and the section 24 of our code of ordinances. We'd go over them and I'd explain the process. As long as that was good, I would let Mr. Anderson know, our Director of Public Works, that they're good to go ahead and proceed forward for their certificate of conveyance of necessity, at which point it'd be put on one of your council agendas to approve or not approve. I don't recall of any not being approved in my time.
When's the last time one came through?
It's been a couple years since we've had a new vehicle for hire.
New vehicle.
We had one last year that was operating unlawfully, and we got a lot of complaints of, mostly from one person, but he's a owner-operator for one of the other companies, and he got everyone else on board. So we looked for this person for quite a while. I eventually met up with her, and once
Understood.
she was
Yeah.
prohibited from operating in the city, she started the process but never finished the process.
Thank you.
But outside of that, it's been a while.
Okay.
So once that's done and certificate of conveyance of necessity is approved, they would then need to have each driver get a chauffeur's permit issued to them. They would do that through the police department. We have a process. They would have to provide a proof of letter of employment from the owner of the cab company, because each chauffeur's permit is assigned to a company and a driver. So if they switch companies, say one switched from company A to company B, they would need to get a new chauffeur's permit reflecting as much. We require a 10-year official driving record from the South Carolina Department of Motor Vehicles, a SLED criminal background check, okay, a notarized chauffeur's permit application, which they pick up from the police department. And it consists of several pages to include a physical from a physician completed on our CPD form, a negative TB test, a negative 5-panel drug screen test, a copy of their South Carolina driver's license, hospitality class certificate. Now, for first-time chauffeur's permits, we grant them a temporary chauffeur's permit, providing them time to take the city's hospitality class. But they would still need to get their permanent chauffeur's permit upon completion of that class.
So
There's
let me
also-
ask you something, Sergeant Uhal. Do drivers of private shuttles, limousines, is it the same process?
Limousines, yes, if they wish to operate in the city of Columbia, they have to have a chauffeur's permit. They're considered a vehicle for hire by our ordinance. Currently, we have none that came through for annual vehicle for hire inspection. Okay. So to be considered vehicle for hire by the city, you have to operate 6 times throughout the year on city streets, either dropping off or picking up a fare. So they also have to have 2 passport photos, 4 if they haven't completed the class, because 2 for the temporary permit and 2 for their permanent one. And it needs to be renewed, the chauffeur's permit, every 3 years. That was established in 2011 when council last reviewed the rates established for taxis and vehicle for hires.
Sergeant, are you the only CPD staff member that does this permitting process? I know you use other departments, business license, everything. I guess I'm just trying to wrap my head around how much employee time goes into this process annually?
Annually, it takes a week for the traffic safety unit. We do it the first 2 weeks of April, ending at April 15th, whichever week is closer. As ride shares became an option in South Carolina 10 years or so ago, we've started to reduce that. It used to take us a full 2 weeks. Now we've shortened it down to a week, and really we're looking at maybe 3 days next year. And then we leave available every Monday and Wednesday inspections should they need re-inspected. So part of our inspection is we put them on a known distance course and we seal the meter. And then we apply a decal to the vehicle. That way we can verify that the rates they're actually being charged are accurate to their vehicle. And they're not adjusting the meter like we saw previously years ago, where people were upping the charges and going outside and then lowering them when they come back in for inspection.
Gotcha. Any questions at this point? So how about this? Can you go forward and just bring back some recommendations on how to tighten up the process that isn't so employee-centric for this? Maybe using some online applications, maybe some good case studies from other municipalities. If there's 123 taxis operating, that's a lot of load on our staff just for that low number.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Wilson.
Mr. Chair, if I might, I would also, and I appreciate the sergeant always being gracious about the time spent on the things that they do, because they do so much. I do think the context of the question you probably received from the taxi cab, I guess he was an owner where this really initiated, is I would also be interested in what, I guess, lean into the staff to determine, in an environment where we're trying to be business friendly, but also always balance public safety, what parts of the process may have become overly burdensome in an environment where there are so much fewer uses of taxis? And are we, to Mr. Brennan's point, in line with other regions? And, you know, how much of this could really be more streamlined?
Yeah, beautifully stated. That's what I meant. Thank you, Ms. Wilson, for putting that forward.
I think you stated it very well, but I think you're also, and we appreciate that, you know, putting the emphasis on the staff time being burdensome. I don't know that it actually is, and he's probably right. I do think that the market would dictate now that we respond in a business-friendly manner to our consumers. And
There are several things. Again, I've researched this extensively over the years. I've spoke with the one person we're speaking to, and one of the companies actually shares the building that my officers reside in with a traffic safety unit. So I speak with that company quite often. There are things that can be streamlined, and I've also worked with South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff, who also regulates all vehicle for hires, be it taxi, shuttles, limousines, but also ride shares. They are regulated by the South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff, unknown to a lot of the taxi drivers. So there are certain things the department feels that we can probably limit some of the stuff on, and I think we can send that
Okay.
up.
Perfect.
But
Thank you for your
There's also
time.
been some ask from the
Great.
taxis. We'll submit it.
Appreciate it, Sergeant.
That concludes our updates, unless you have any further questions. Last thing I'd like just to tell you is Thursday, right here at Busby Street at 130, we're promoting 23 police officers to new ranks. We're very excited about that. We've gone through a very robust promotional process, began before Christmas and with our officers, and we have a qualified list that is just and top to bottom an outstanding list that we will be able to pull from over the next
Fantastic.
12 to 18 months. So we're really excited about that.
Well, Chief, you know you have a council that supports the recruitment retention efforts for you and your team. Thank you for the presentations today. I know a lot of your team pulled that data together. And just keep up the great work of relationship building in our communities. It's very known, and we hear a lot of feedback from our districts about the great things that the neighborhoods and CPD are doing together. So any other questions, comments before we move on? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So moving on to committee discussion, item number 2, proposed right-of-way signage ordinance. Ms. Jasmine Kurz. How are you today?
Finding you. Good
Doing well.
morning. Well, yes, good morning. Councilman Brennan, I believe this was something he brought to our attention about the signage that are located in the right-of-ways in various places. And so what we did is we made some minor changes first to Chapter 22 of our code section. But that is just dealing with the designation of certain tasks by our city manager. However, the primary changes we made are found on page 2. We've added code sections 2275 through 2277. So to kind of walk you through that, 2275 is mirroring our state law, which says that signage in the right-of-way is unlawful. And it talks about all signage, and so that would pertain to anything that you see, even political signs as well. And so we mirrored that and it made it an unlawful activity, which means that you can be charged. And that's state law right now, you can be charged for that. But you can be charged based on our code section that we've created. The additional component that we added is a signage removal fee. And so essentially what that does is you receive notice when a signage is located, a written notification would be sent to the person who is either, we've noted you've affixed the signage or you've placed it in that unlawful area, or the owner of the signage. So you receive notice saying, hey, your signage is in an improper area, we've removed it, and this is your notice that it is unlawful, citing the state statute and the code section that would apply. After 3 or more receipts of that notice, then you see a tiered removal fee. And so what we have is for any removals that are 3 to 7 removals, you'll have a fee of $100 that'll apply. For a removal of 8 to 9, it's $250, and then 10 or more is $500. What I want to note is that a person would not receive multiple infractions in one day. So for example, if there's signage in one area, in one particular region, and then we locate another signage that same day in another region, that still counts as one removal. That does not, it's not tiered or stacked based upon those varying locations. And then the last component talks about the appeal process. You have 10 days upon receipt of that letter to notify the city manager or whomever she may designate as the person who receives those. And at that time, you can say you're appealing whatever the infraction is, whether it's a fee or just saying what the fee that would be imposed. Failure to provide that notice within 10 days would constitute a waiver, and therefore we would proceed with any enforcement actions.
Thank you for that. I've got a few questions, but I'll open it up. Mr. Brown?
Oh, man, I have several. Oh, wow. All right, so first of all, because there are a bunch of political signs out illegally right now, I'm going to touch on those. So most people probably know where I live, and I've got a little triangle near my house that tends to attract signs, either business and or political. So is it illegal for me to walk out there and to pick up an illegal sign and get rid of it?
Yes, sir. So municipalities are tasked with being able to remove those signs. So if you report to the appropriate department within the city, they can remove those. And I think Also, one component is just kind of providing notice to people. I think sometimes people just lack the understanding that you cannot have it located in a particular
All
area.
right, so it would not be, I could not remove an illegal sign?
No,
as a-
not,
as
no,
a
no,
citizen?
sir.
Okay. Second thing is, so is there a specific way to initiate a complaint if I'm me and I have to look at the island full of signs? So how would I do that?
So you can call, and I'm gonna have to ask, yeah. I do, yeah, so if you make a call to Planning and Development Services, they can coordinate and get in contact with the appropriate persons to make sure those signage are removed, and those individuals who have placed the sign or the sign belongs to are notified.
So I would either call, could I also, if I was not just specifically me, but say my neighbor wants to make a complaint, they could call or email the city?
Yes, sir.
And I'll add, if I might, Attorney Kears, it's a team effort with this, and particularly in campaign season, as you mentioned, Councilman, but code enforcement staff, Mr. Hatcher's here and his team, as Jasmine mentioned, Krista's team with Planning and Development Services, but also Mr. Anderson is here with Public Works. So we try to have all of the staff on the same page about the rules, and we know that people make their inquiries of the city different ways. So I think any of those areas could be of assistance.
And Ms.
Okay, so
Wilson, may I make a plug for the My Columbia SC app?
Yes,
Right.
that, as we launch My Columbia SC app, that would also be a wonderful mechanism and tool for people to submit their complaints.
So my final question would be, because part of this is, I think it's, rewarding bad behavior by allowing things to, sit there is what we don't want to do. So what we want to do is reward good behavior, not bad behavior. So the process, let's suppose that I called today and said, hey, I've got 4 illegal signs in my triangle by my yard at 1105 Glenwood Road. What would be the next step, and when would I have some completion of the process? So how long would it take to get that sign removed?
Is it a work order? What's the next steps?
I mean, it probably would happen that day, depending upon the capacity of any of those departments that I just mentioned to get out there and take care of it. And just for clarification, this triangle hypothetically near your yard is in the public right away, not your private?
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
okay,
City of Columbia takes care of it.
okay,
We never could figure out who owned it, but we take care of it anyway.
gotcha. Well, we would probably deploy someone that same day, because our folks are pretty Johnny and Janie's on the spot with the signage, but obviously within the day, I would say.
Okay, so we want to get to the point where there's some immediacy to the issue.
Yes, sir. Now, I think what may have also spurred this conversation is, not necessarily the onesie-twosies like we might be talking about right now, but whole corridors where you
They're
see.
definitely everywhere.
Yes,
Yeah.
and you
They're
see like on the
mushrooms.
poles and, all the advertisements for things, and we're talking about political signage, but that's really not the impetus, I think, behind this. Obviously, I try to work with all of our, campaigns and everyone, because we know the season, it just can't get out of hand, but we do try leading up to elections to be a little bit more tolerant and work with people and continue to educate outside of the political type signage, and Jasmine will probably make some more distinctions about that. We were really trying to address these other
Well,
just
they tend to-
advertisements and all of that
They
in
tend to.
whole
to-
corridors.
One begets another one.
It does,
and then another
absolutely.
one begets another one, and it tends to then.
It's
before
the
you know it-
effectiveness of the enforcement that kind of was the root
Yes.
of my request for this, because in the major corridors, this is really working against our efforts for litter and beautification.
That's correct.
And so I do want to see us be more mindful of the how to report these signs and our effectiveness on response. So if there's any clear number on our website, I think Ms. Hammond mentioned the My Columbia SC portal. that specifically says for, sign, pickup, or anything, call this number.
And we would certainly need to do an education campaign if the committee and then the
Right.
council decide to move forward with, some tighter enforcement mechanisms.
And I know in the past, a lot of these signs have 1-800 numbers. So the effectiveness of serving them that warning letter, that's an issue. That's difficult, right?
There is some difficulty there. I would say kind of towards what the chief was just talking about. We have cameras, we have all these different technology capabilities in place that may help us kind of figure out or ascertain who the person is that's actually placing those signage in that area. And so we will be utilizing that. And then also to the city manager's point, I do think, especially we are now in the political realm and that campaigns are ramping up, they're just an education piece, because I think that's what is happening here, is maybe some people are just not
Right,
aware.
so the tree removal signs that are, somebody got smart and put them on power poles 8 feet up, so they're tough to remove. They have a number on them, a 803 number. Would we go through the steps of calling that number and even further determine if they have a business license to operate in the city? I just want to deter this way of promoting a business illegally.
I think that's something we can definitely look into and to see what's the best steps and procedures to educate and/or to ascertain what those, the status of those particular businesses are. Yes, sir.
And Jasmine, it may be good for David, for Mr. Hatcher to talk about what they do now in those instances.
Absolutely.
Sure. Dave's actually on the way. Generally, when we get a call for the signage, we'll like Ms. Wilson said, we'll jump on it right away. The ordinance doesn't change that. We'll still remove them immediately. It's just going to be the after fact, trying to find out who's putting the signs there. We started tracking at the beginning of January, and we found about 18. We pulled about 800 out of the right of way already this year. So in that database, we're starting to kind of see trends. It's really a handful of numbers that make up the majority of them, like the tree services and the mattress services and that. So what we would do is take that information and try to track down, through research, through the technology that Ms. Kearse had mentioned, and just try to send them notices and try to put them on notice for it. And that's kind of what we're planning on doing with this ordinance.
Yes, but I guess I'm suggesting we take it the next step as well, to make sure they're operating as a true business within the city limits. So I know that's not specifically code enforcement's lane.
But I think you have a lot of
we do.
coordination with Kelly Smith and business license,
Yes,
so
we
to answer
definitely-
his question.
The business license is a key thing. We
Yeah,
want to
it
make sure.
is.
Perfect.
Going forward, we want to make sure they do have business
Okay.
licenses and everything.
Fantastic. Ms. Herbert?
And I was just gonna add, I'm hoping too that the more we're Johnny on the spot and removing things, it will become more expensive for the folks who are doing it. That they will be deterred from doing it. But I think that's also why the signs look the way they look, because they buy the cheapest signs. Because, they know that they aren't gonna last really long, but I'm hoping that'll be a deterrent.
It's also interesting that yesterday, my wife saw a DOT truck removing signs at my favorite place, Leesburg and I-77.
Okay,
So,
it's good to know.
yeah.
All right, anything else? Fantastic. Thank you for that update. Look forward to see. Go
I'm
for it.
sorry, I did have a question. Do you all keep the signs, the removal fee? Do you give them back the signs? Or are we trashing them? Not that I'm suggesting.
I know without Mr. Anderson having to get up and come at Public Works, there is the ability to store signs for a length of time, particularly with the campaigns. We try to, work with them. Now, these others.
It's under
I
the
think
trailer in
we-
the public works law.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that.
Well,
Yeah.
I was about to say, because it seems like if we've given someone enough warnings, then I wouldn't necessarily feel obligated to continue to store. Because there are folks that should, they know that they're not supposed to be doing it. Okay.
Mr. Chair, is the will of the committee to move this forward?
Yes,
Okay.
if there's some consensus,
Yes.
I would like to move that forward.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Item number 3, Fighting Hate on Main Street Municipal Toolkit. Ms. Jessica Keinert.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I don't believe y'all have copies of this. So if I may hand that out.
We have the model ordinances.
Oh, you have it? You
And
do
the
have it. Great.
index,
Nope,
yes.
That's it. So this was passed on at this committee from the mayor who received this toolkit and basically wants to ensure that our ordinances are up to pace with the stringency that these model ordinances provide. So what I have done is gone through our ordinances and compare those to what is provided in the toolkit and try to come up with an outline of where we may be deficient, if that's the word we want to use, or different in gearing our ordinances toward fighting hate particularly. So just to start from the top, I suppose, with the charitable solicitations, well, I don't know why I had that first. Overpass banners is something, we'll start there because that's first in the model ordinance. We don't have anything about that. Most overpasses are DOT right-of-ways, so we don't have a current city ordinance on that. We do specifically have an ordinance about the banners that, for example, go over Elmwood or where those can be placed, and the city has to sign off on those and is responsible for posting and removing those. But as far as anything regarding particularly speech, as this envisions, you know, whether it's a rally or a political sign or people standing on a train trestle and waving flags, we don't have anything about that. So that's something that we can consider if we think it is worth it to write an ordinance regarding that piece. Looking at model ordinance number 2, projected images, that's a rather new thing, and we certainly do not have an ordinance on that. As you can see in most of these model ordinances, there are 2 versions. One is a little more subdued, one is a little more pointed toward the content of these signs or images that we were discussing. So say, for example, in the projected images one, for example, we'd have a difference between, you know, USC National Women's Basketball Champions projected on the side of a building versus a political or a hate message. So that's also an ordinance that we can add to our arsenal if y'all believe that is warranted. Moving on to number 3, graffiti. We do have a very stringent graffiti ordinance. However, we don't have any portions that relate to what subsection C refers to in here regarding the protected groups and any specific hate-oriented or messages of that regard. So that is something that we could consider beefing up our graffiti ordinance with if we believe that is a necessary portion. And then we get to the overnight soliciting and canvassing, and this is an area that we've seen a lot of requests for interwoven kind of portions regarding this. For example, we've been discussing a panhandling ordinance, an ordinance regarding flyers, and I was recently contacted by Harold Reeves of CBD's Special Events Group, who wants to talk about an ordinance regarding protests. And in particularly, he referred me to Greenville's ordinance, which requires notice to the city a certain amount of time based on how many people they anticipate will be showing up for the protest, just so the city can be prepared with proper police response if necessary. So
Don't
thought we
do
had that in place.
We do that with permitting.
we do have some permitting, but it's not quite the same. He wants a little bit more, and he wants it to be geared toward protesting specifically. We don't have an ordinance entitled protesting. And it's something we have to be careful about because there is certainly a First Amendment right to assemble and free speech and all of that. But as far as for the public safety, it's possible to beef up that a little bit. But the soliciting and canvassing, one thing that I think we need to determine is how we want to look at this, if we want to differentiate between commercial or non-commercial, because that is a differentiation that we have already in our ordinances, and if we want to differentiate how we regulate things that happen in public versus, for example, door-to-door things, whether it's sales or even charitable issues. And charitable issues are taken out, they're already accepted in our ordinance, so like the Girl Scouts, the school fundraising, things like that. But, so we don't really have too much as far as, we do have an overnight prohibition, which is, I think, what this model ordinance was based on. So to sum all this up, we have a lot of things that are already in our ordinances, and we can beef them up in certain ways. It's just a matter of what we want to focus on. Do we want to take, for example, graffiti and beef it up to include these messages that prevent hate speech or any kind of demeaning language? Do we want to try to work with DOT to regulate rights of way that aren't ours with these overpass banners, things like that? Do we want to create an ordinance about projected images? And do we want to edit or change our canvassing, solicitation, ordinance in order to be more in line with this objective?
Ms. Wilson, what, thank you for that info, Ms. Kiner. What is your suggestion on next steps? I feel like we took this as information today,
Yes, sir.
and I don't think any outcomes will be moved forward, so just wanted to get your input.
Well, it really is my first, I guess, deep dive hearing some of the feedback from legal, so we probably would need to take it under advisement, work with our various departments, particularly CPD and Public Works. An example that comes to mind is, most of you all know, and several months ago, we spent a good bit of time out on 126 coming in where the trestle is, with the type of language and hate speech that was affixed to that trestle, which did not belong to us, but the railroad, for example. So I don't know, without, I guess, discussing it more with TK and her team, what teeth could have been more applied in an instance like that. We spent a lot of time and a lot of resources to get that off quickly for our capital city. It probably really wasn't our responsibility to do that,
Well, I
but we did
appreciate
it
you doing that.
anyway. So if things like that come to mind, if there's any more coordination or, obviously, I'm sure there are already applicable laws that would apply if you actually had camera footage of someone who did something like that I don't know how they did it, because I'm not sure how they survived doing it at the time.
Out
But
there.
anyway, I would be interested in those things. As to protests, I mean, we are a capital city that deals with protests on a very regular basis and has dealt with it very well. So I'd be interested from the staff perspective, again, on if there really are any, if there's anything else that's truly needed. And
Well, thank
I
you.
don't have an answer for that
Okay,
today.
well, I will defer to you, Ms. Wilson, in working with staff and other departments, DOT, for example.
Yeah.
But please, let's continue the responsiveness
Absolutely.
when the graffiti example.
Yes.
So we
Yes,
have to take care of our city, because some other departments don't, so.
Yes, sir.
All right, any other questions?
I just wanted to add, when we were talking about something specific for protests, and the first thing that just kind of popped up in my head is making sure we aren't making such a distinction that protesters feel that we're making such a distinction and treating them different from any other group that's gathering. So I would be curious to see.
Yeah, I think that was the first I'm hearing that
Rally versus
whatever.
protest.
But I think it's just an event, a gathering of people, and are we gonna distinguish what they're there for?
And I may have been premature in bringing that up. I've only spoken to Mr. Reeves about that personally. It hasn't, that
Oh.
element has not been referred.
Oh.
But I
didn't
feel
hear
like I feel like it fits in with this whole discussion and the mayor's purpose. So I wanted to bring it forward. And I agree, we do need to make sure we don't chill speech in any way by any group. And we don't want to use protest as a negative word, I think might be what you were saying. So I completely agree with that as we go forward. And to go back to your point, Mr. Chairman, there are a lot of we have a lot of this covered already. We just need to figure out how to enforce and if we want to beef anything up to specifically address this hate speech kind of element.
Fantastic. Ms. Wilson, thank you to you and your staff for a great committee meeting. If there's no other questions or comments, we will go ahead and adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, thank you.